That was one incredible introduction. I hope I can live up to it. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be with you tonight. I'm thrilled, in fact. It reminds me of the days when I taught at the college level, and I so welcome opportunities that I don't get as often as I used to be with young people, especially those as passionate and energetic about liberty as this group is. So I'm thrilled to be with you, and some of those stories you told, Isaac, made me think back to a wonderful, great many moments. I wish we had time to talk about them. But you mentioned the burning of the Soviet flag. Well, I tell you, that was a thrill. At age 14, it was 40 years ago in August, this past August, that I did that with our Young Americans for Freedom chapter. And I'll never forget, we thought we had that all choreographed perfectly. It was in Mellon Square, downtown Pittsburgh. We told the local TV stations, one of them showed up and had a camera crew there. We just started the burning, and we all had our placards, and the camera crew started rolling, and up comes a maintenance guy who, just totally oblivious to the camera, intrudes on the whole scene and says, "Put that out, you can't do that." It ruined our demonstration, but not our spirits. And that's really the year I became active in these ideas, so it's hard to believe it's been 40 years. Well, tonight, Isaac has asked me to talk to you about my favorite president. And every time I have an opportunity to talk about one of, if not this particular favorite president of mine, I'm always inclined to begin by quoting an old friend of mine, now deceased, by the name of Tom Anderson, who was a great political humorist. And years ago, he was describing several presidents in a row, and he said that Franklin Roosevelt proved that a man could be president a lifetime. Harry Truman proved that any man could be president. Dwight Eisenhower proved that we really didn't need one. And every president since has proven that it's dangerous to have one. And he was often fond of pointing out the sad lack of sharp differences between the political parties. And he spoke often not of Republicans and Democrats, but of Socialist Party A and Socialist Party B. And I heard him once say that switching from one to the other all too often was like leaving a spoiled diaper on a baby and just changing the safety pin. Still the case in a lot of respects, so we have a lot of work to do. My favorite president tonight might not be one that you would guess. First off, he's been long dead. It's not William Henry Harrison, although I can make a very strong case for him. He caught cold on Inauguration Day, died in a month, and hardly did any harm. But he's not my favorite. And many of you know I've written about this one, so it might not be too much of a surprise. But my favorite president, not because I think he was necessarily the best, but I do include him in the half dozen very best presidents. He's simply my personal favorite because I've become attached to his story, met some members of his family, and enjoy very much talking about him. And that is Grover Cleveland. Born Stephen Grover Cleveland, actually, but the Stephen he dropped rather early, and so history hardly ever notes that his real first name was Stephen. And would you believe, in 1995, I met Grover Cleveland's son, who was still living. He was 92 years of age in 1995. His father had been elected president for the first time in 1884. Now for me, this was an incredible thrill. I think I wrote my first article about Grover Cleveland in our little newsletter at Grove City College back in 1973. So I had written a number of articles about Grover Cleveland over the years. It never occurred to me that he would have a son still alive in the mid-1990s. But I was reading an almanac of politics, something of that nature, and it had a lot of trivia in there about every president, including their children, their birth dates, their death dates, and where they lived. And under Grover Cleveland, it listed the 5 children that he and his wife Frances had. The 5th of the children was born in 1903, when Grover was 67 years of age, and several years after he left the White House in 1897. They had their 5th child. And there was no death date. It said 1903, no death date, Tamworth, New Hampshire. And I thought, could this guy still be living? He'd be the oldest child of a living child of an American president. And so I got information for Tamworth, New Hampshire, and I asked for a number for Francis Cleveland, got the number, and called, and a man answered, and I said, "Is this Francis Cleveland?" And he said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Son of the former president?" And he said, "That's me." And I'll never forget the thrill that I got. And I said, "You know, I've written about your father. I have a blow-up of a picture of a $1,000 bill hanging in my dining room because your dad's picture is on the $1,000 bill. And I'm coming up to New York this summer to give a couple speeches in July and then in August. On one of those trips, I'd like to drive up to New Hampshire and see you. Could I do that?" And here's what he said, 92 years of age. He said, 65 years ago, I started a performing arts group here in Tamworth called the Barnstormers, and I'm still directing it. I'm completely booked in July. Can you come in August? This was in May of 95. So I said, okay, I'll come in August. So Bert Folsom, whom those of you from Hillsdale will especially know Bert, he and I went and spent an evening with Grover Cleveland's son. And it was remarkable. He was in great health for a 92-year-old. He told us stories about his father. Not that he personally remembered so much because his dad died in 1908 when he was 5, but he passed on stories to us that his mother had told over the years. She lived 40 years beyond the death of Grover in 1908. She lived till 1947. If you're wondering how could a wife outlast a president or a husband who died at the age of 71, how could she outlast him by 40 years? Well, when they were married in the White House in 1886, the first president to be married in the White House, in fact, Grover was 49 and his bride was 21. And over the years, I've told this story about Grover Cleveland many times that you're about to hear tonight, and depending on the audience, I may have to come down a few levels. And when I was on the board of a charter school in the late 90s, I was asked to give this talk to a group of 6th graders. It was at the height of the Monica Lewinsky scandal under Clinton. I thought, well, you know, how do you bring this down so that 6th graders will understand what I had to say about Grover Cleveland? And I thought, well, they're going to love the story about his getting married in the White House as president, he being 49, she being 21. And lo and behold, first question from these 6th graders, it's from a young lady who raised her hand and wanted to know, was she an intern? What a sad commentary on America. Well, she was not, but that's another story. So now let me tell you why I like Grover Cleveland. If you were to go down Main Street America and talk to ordinary citizens and just raise his name and ask people randomly, what do you know about Grover Cleveland, you wouldn't learn very much. I think that's a sad commentary on Americans and perhaps our education system, that such a great man is largely forgotten barely a century after he passed away. If they know anything, they'll tell you perhaps, well, yeah, wasn't he a really big president? And he was. He, to this day, ranks as the 2nd heaviest of 43 presidents at about 270 pounds. But that was still about 80 pounds less than William Howard Taft, who had to be pried out of the White House bathtub. No kidding. And they had to build a new one for him. He couldn't get out of it, so they literally had to pry him out and build a new bathtub for him. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, a few years ago, there was a traveling exhibit that was going all over the country, but it stopped in Grand Rapids for a couple months, of presidential memorabilia. And it featured actual things that belonged to or were directly associated with all the presidents, and 2 or 3 things for each one. And for Taft, they had the bathtub that they had to build and put in the White House for him when the